Imagine one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, someone destined to balance the Force, being subjugated to a life of servitude, with his potential reduced with every step he took towards his master. That was Darth Vader's fate under Palpatine's rule. The question is, why, as one of the greatest Sith ever, was his power so limited at the Emperor's side? This is a question that makes us reflect on the dynamics of control, manipulation, and even the influence of the Force itself. But how does this apply to our daily lives? How can this story mirror our own reality? To understand why Darth Vader didn't reach his true potential, we need to look at his relationship with Palpatine. From the outset, Palpatine exerted a subtle but devastating influence on Anakin Skywalker. Not only did he manipulate him emotionally, using his fears and insecurities, but he also physically trapped him in armor that limited his movements and, more importantly, his connection to the Force. Darth Vader's armor, although essential for his survival after the serious injuries he suffered, was also a physical and spiritual prison. Designed by Palpatine, this armor was not only created to keep him alive, but also to control him. With limited systems and reduced mobility, Vader could never again fight or move with the agility he possessed as Anakin Skywalker. This physical impediment directly influenced his connection to the Force, since in the Star Wars universe, body and spirit are deeply intertwined. With a body that didn't respond completely to his will, his sensitivity to the Force was also impaired. In addition to the physical limitation, Vader's armor acted as a kind of barrier between him and the natural flow of the Force. In his weakened state, Vader had to rely even more on the dark side to compensate for his limitations. This, however, created a vicious cycle. The more he relied on the dark side, the further he moved away from the balance that could restore part of his connection with the Force. The armor not only isolated him physically, but also energetically. The rigidity of his movements was reflected in the rigidity of his access to the vital energy of the Force. This technological prison, created to keep him alive, made him vulnerable in several ways. Firstly, because Palpatine had complete control over the armor's functionality. If he wanted to, the Emperor could easily turn it off or adjust it to further limit Vader's powers. Secondly, the armor functioned as a constant reminder of his downfall and his dependence on the Emperor. Every mechanical breath Vader took kept him trapped in a cycle of submission, and this sense of powerlessness and external control undermined his confidence and his ability to fully connect with the Force. In addition to the physical and spiritual impact, the armor also contributed to Vader's emotional isolation. His deformed appearance and artificial breathing created a symbolic barrier between him and the rest of the universe. He became a figure of terror, but also a lonely figure. This loneliness reinforced his anger and resentment, which led him to sink even deeper into the dark side. Instead of finding a way to overcome his limitations and access the fullness of the Force again, Vader trapped himself in his own prison, physically and emotionally, unable to realize that his true strength did not come from technology or raw power, but from the harmony he had lost. The armor, which many see as a symbol of Vader's power, was actually a prison, designed to keep him dependent and submissive. In real life, we often find ourselves trapped by circumstances or people who, under the pretext of strengthening us, end up weakening us. Palpatine understood what many manipulative leaders understand. A subordinate who is too strong can become a threat. By keeping Vader constantly submissive and weakened, Palpatine ensured his own position of power. This leads us to reflect on how power relationships, whether at work, in personal relationships, or even in our spiritual growth, can be constructed to keep us dependent. When someone feeds off our fears, our vulnerability, we put ourselves in a position of constant limitation. Just as Vader was kept under the control of the Emperor, we can also, without realizing it, be kept under the control of influences that prevent us from accessing our full potential. Then there's the emotional aspect. Vader, even though he was a Sith, carried a heavy emotional burden, a burden of regrets and traumas. His anger and pain were the fuel for his power on the dark side, but also what kept him imprisoned. This can be seen in many situations in our lives, when we cling to destructive emotions which, although they seem to strengthen us in the short term, eat away at us in the long term. The Force, both in the Star Wars universe and in our reality, is balanced. When we lean too far to one side, as Vader did with his anger, we disconnect from this balance and thus limit our own power. Vader's incomplete training was also a key element. When Anakin became Vader, he had not yet mastered all aspects of the Force. Palpatine, being a skilled strategist, ensured that Vader never had the opportunity to complete this training. Vader had a wealth of knowledge, but lacked the wisdom that only years of practice and study could provide. This can be compared to our journey of self-knowledge. We often believe that we know enough, that we have mastered our own powers, when in fact we are only on the surface. Palpatine kept Vader ignorant of certain aspects of the Force, just as in our own lives we can be kept ignorant of our true potential. Another important point is isolation. Although Vader was a feared and respected figure, he was essentially alone. Palpatine isolated him from other powerful beings who could challenge him or help him grow. This isolation can also be seen as a control tactic in various areas of our lives. When we distance ourselves from people who could inspire, challenge, or support us, we become easier to manipulate. Just as Vader was isolated from the rest of the galaxy, we can isolate ourselves from opportunities for growth and learning, and this limits our potential for growth, both personal and spiritual. Another fundamental aspect that limited Vader's power was the very nature of the dark side of the Force. Unlike the light side, which seeks balance and harmony, the dark side feeds on negative emotions such as anger, fear, and hatred. These emotions, although they can generate an immediate burst of power, create a barrier between the user and the deep connection with the Force. In Vader's case, his dependence on these emotions led him away from a fuller understanding of the Force. The dark side promises unlimited power, but in reality, it traps the user in a cycle of internal destruction, making them unable to access the full breadth of the Force. This corrosion is both physical and spiritual. On Vader's body, the scars and the need for his armor are reflections of the toll the dark side has taken on him. But the impact was not limited to the physical. The dark side also destroyed his more refined sensitivity to the Force. By using the dark side as his main source of power, Vader lost the balance that would make him truly powerful. He became a hostage to his own impulses, unable to access the subtlest and deepest parts of the Force, those that could give him clarity, vision, and true control. There is also the question of emotional dependency. The dark side intensifies emotions and creates a form of dependency in which the user needs more anger and hatred to maintain their power. This keeps Vader in a constant state of imbalance. Thus, he was always in search of more power, but without realizing that this path took him away from his true potential. His connection with the Force was distorted, and instead of finding strength and balance, Vader plunged deeper and deeper into a self-destructive cycle, unable to realize that he was becoming weaker in the long run. This disconnection with the Force is visible in Vader's actions throughout his career. Although he was extremely strong in combat and in immediate manipulations, he did not demonstrate the clarity of vision that other masters of the Force possessed. His decisions were often impulsive, guided by intense and unstable emotions. This reveals how the dark side deprived him of a deeper and more balanced connection with the Force, limiting his ability to foresee events, understand his surroundings, and, above all, free himself from Palpatine's influence. The story of Darth Vader and his relationship with Palpatine teaches us a valuable lesson about control, power, and self-limitation. Although Vader was incredibly powerful, he was kept in a cage both physically and emotionally. He was manipulated, isolated, and ultimately betrayed by the dark side that promised unlimited power, but in reality weakened him with every choice. As we reflect on this, we can ask ourselves, who or what is limiting us? What influences, internal or external, prevent us from accessing our full potential? Just as Vader had his power restricted under Palpatine's control, perhaps we are also allowing external or even internal forces to keep us stuck in a limited version of ourselves. Looking at Darth Vader's trajectory, we see that although he was one of the most feared Sith, he never reached his true potential because he was trapped in a dynamic of control. In the end, the biggest lesson we can take from this story is that in order to access our true power, we need to free ourselves from the influences that limit us. Whether it's a Palpatine in our lives or the invisible chains of fear, it's only when we free ourselves from these bonds that we can truly access our full potential. be it in the Force or in any other aspect of life. Remembering that if you want to delve deeper into your connection with the Force, in the pinned comment of this video, there is a step-by-step guide to starting from scratch and reaching a deep state of meditation. May the Force be with you.